Okay, let's get doing it on this one. All right, so welcome back. We are WEBD6201 in the winter 2022 semester at Durham, and it's week 14, part 2 of our broadcast and recording. And my friends, this is more of a culmination of everything that we put together this entire semester today. So I'm hoping that you'll have a good time with this one. This in-class exercise is a little bit different, like I mentioned last time, only because of how we've put it together. So again, sitting at week 14. Last day, what we talked about was how to build an API server. We also used Postman. Some of you found that interesting to use. And today we're going to be talking about a couple of different ways of connecting to our API backend. One of them is called Fetch, right, which is an API that's built into JavaScript, the latest version of JavaScript. And the other one is called Axios. And Axios is an NPM module that you can download, and it works great for both the front end and the back end. And we'll talk about which one I prefer. Then we'll do a very brief intro to React, a tour of how React works, what is it, how to install it, general principles about how it works and how to connect stuff, and some troubleshooting when we kind of finish off our in-class exercise. This ICE is due on Saturday, and Lab 4, like we said before, is moved to Sunday. So those are the things that are happening now. Without further ado, let's move into what the heck is Fetch anyway. So we needed some way of connecting to the back end. Last day, we kind of made our back end, pump out JSON data. And so how do you connect to that back end from the front end? We could use Ajax, but most modern web frameworks on the front end don't use Ajax anymore for a lot of reasons. Security is definitely one of them. Clunkiness, it's like ease of use. It's not the easiest to use. They want more features and more versatility, more maintainability. They like the Promise API in general because of the asynchronous nature of JavaScript thing that we keep talking about over and over again, and how that messes people up. And so Fetch came along. It's been something that's been in the works for a while. And over the last several iterations, little updates of JavaScript, Fetch is there. It's kind of very similar to an XML HTTP request. It supports service workers and also supports CORS, cross-origin resource sharing. But the main thing about it, where it differs from jQuery Ajax, is it has a promise that's returned. Okay, that's very important. And one thing that Fetch uses, we use credentials to connect to things like when it comes to cross-origin requests. Cross-origin means that if I want to have the same, a front end and a back end on the same box, the same server, I can do that, resource sharing across the same thing. So it supports that. Ajax does not. Not out of the box. It takes more work, all right? And of course, web developers, like every developer, wants to have the least amount of work possible so that their job is easier and more straightforward. So the Fetch framework or API looks like this. You have the Fetch keyword followed by your API endpoint. Then you have two promises, promise number 1 and promise number 2. And this is on purpose. The first promise is the response object. So it gives you the response object, but doesn't necessarily give you the JSON response body. The JSON response body is actually coming in the second promise. And you know what? If it wasn't for this, if it was only this for me, one response object and everything else, there'd be no need for you to use any other API out there. I would be using Fetch. But you're going to see why I don't prefer it. Okay, so again, you got the second promise happening and everything else, and it might look something like this. You may have to create a wrapper where you have an async await. We talked about a little bit of async await and promises. And so I have a wrapper, and the wrapper itself kind of wraps around the Fetch API itself. That's the Fetch API, right? And then you can configure it. You can, by default, Fetch uses GET requests. You can make it use POST requests. You can also state that it's using the mode is cross-origin resource sharing or not. And you can also manage the headers, which is what we're going to be focusing on today, how to manage headers, where I can pass in the bearer token and all that kind of stuff. So that is kind of how you can make it work. And then because this is a wrapper function, then the wrapper function can be used down here with a promise. So only one promise comes out at the other end. But there's a lot of kind of setup to make it work properly, right? It can work just like this, but you have two promises, and that's kind of confusing sometimes. So that's why I don't prefer Fetch at all. I prefer something called Axios. Let's take a look at Axios. Axios is a module that's available to you. It is something that you can use ECMAScript module pattern to import. And the great thing about it is it only returns one promise. And it uses that the same style that we're very happy about. It's something that is very common among React developers when they connect with JWT, so JSON Web Tokens, and you have two separate pieces. You have a back end, which is Node.js, and you have a front end that is something else, whether it is Angular or React or Vue or something else. Whatever it is, you can use Axios, which is great. That's how versatile it is. Whereas Fetch has its issues. Fetch has compatibility issues with slightly older versions of Edge, as well as Internet Explorer, of course, and a bunch of other stuff. Whereas Axios is compatible with it all, right? Because it's a great little module. Axios is the Fetch that I would want to have. How about that? That's the way I think about it. All right, so since Axios is the way to go, it's promise-based, it's isomorphic, which means it can work on the browser and on the back end, on the server side with the same code base, no problem. It uses XML HTTP requests the same way that Ajax does. So that's a good thing. And it has a bunch of features like the ability for you to, it supports the Promise API. It can work on Node.js. It works on intercepting requests and responses and transforming them. It can also cancel requests if you want to. It also automatically transforms JSON data so that it works properly. So you don't have to do a JSON stringify or anything like that, as well as client-side support for protecting against cross-site resource forgery, right, attempts, which is something that we talked about from security concerns last week, right, which is one of the things we talked about. So Axios does it all when it comes to that. The Axios API looks pretty straightforward. And again, here's an example of how we add it in. We require it, or we can use the import ECMAScript module pattern instead of this one. We can make a GET request. There's the GET request. And the GET request will have an API endpoint followed by a promise. So that's the promise. And then after the promise, you have a catch area. So this is like a try catch. That's what it is. Try to do this. If not, then catch the error. And then finally. So it's like it goes along with that kind of structure. Try, catch, finally. That kind of structure. And it's very nice. It is asynchronous, but you don't have to use the async await keywords, which is also extra. It's better because what that does is it reduces our syntax. And whenever I have reduction in syntax, I'm happier because it's just that much easier to use. So that's your GET request. Similarly, a POST request looks the same, where you have the POST, you have your API endpoint, followed by some kind of configuration data that you want to send to the server. For example, of some kind of first name, last name that you want to update. And then you have your promise with a response. You can actually output the response that you get back, if there's any. Usually it's some kind of communication from the server saying, everything's okay, you did a great job. And here's the stuff you asked me to do. And then a catch if there's any kind of errors. So this is a very straightforward way of using stuff. And again, we're going to use Axios today inside of our services that we're going to create. That's Axios. And then there is React. Wow. It's been a bit for me with React, and I've been using it on and off now for a few years. I'll be honest with you, for most of the time, I really preferred Angular. We talked about the journey between Angular and React. React started off, I kind of like to say, as like Angular's uglier brother, right, kind of thing. It was, very short, and they try to make it very sweet and everything else as well. And I mean that in terms of it was more of what it says here, a library. But as they continued to evolve, React became more and more component based. It changed a lot of the stuff how it worked. And I know this is kind of an opinionated thing that I'm saying. Some people, if you're a React developer, you're going to hate what I say right now. But the thing is, I mean, it's become more Angular-like right now, right? I mean, if you actually look at the complexity, and you compare what you can do with React and how you can piece it together. When you look at an Angular project, you look at a React project, you look at the similarities between the two. Both are using Webpack, which is also something that's happening on the back end. Let's take a look at Webpack really quickly. Webpack is like what it says, it's like a packager, and it takes a bunch of dependencies like JavaScript and images and CSS and a bunch of stuff, and it creates static assets for you at the back end. So when we build from a deployment perspective, you feed it with a bunch of stuff that needs to be transpiled and that needs to be minified and a bunch of other things, and then it comes out the other side as really great little assets that you can put up from a deployment perspective. So in development is on this side, and in production is on this side. So production assets, production ready. However, I have to mention that although it says, hey, look how easy it is to do it, when we bundle, it's a bundler, right? When we bundle things together, by no means is it easy. Okay, it can be very complex. And one of the things that I found over the years of using Webpack is, and it's evolved a great deal, I have to give it credit in terms of how easy it is. It's difficult to put together. In the early years of Angular, Webpack was a monster. It was a beast to work with. And you had to, go through the configuration files. And for people who were learning it at the time, it was very challenging. But now it's all integrated. I mean, there's really nothing about it. It's there in the background. We don't ever see Webpack, but it's there for us. And it's there for both Angular and React. So again, very similar in terms of the way they do their bundling, which we're going to see later on as we finish off this in-class exercise. So that was one piece of technology that I wasn't happy with. But now it's not so bad. Webpack does a bunch of stuff for us that we can't possibly do. If we were trying to think about doing this on our own, it'd be very, very challenging. Okay, so that is, kind of where we want to go. So what about React? Let's think about this React stuff. Let's go back to the beginning. So here's React, and it says, yeah, it's component-based, and it's declarative, which is like telling, you're telling your browser what you want to do. And it's very similar in philosophy to some of the new languages that are out there. For example, Swift UI is also declarative. And what it means is, when I first looked at this way of doing things, it uses something like JSX. And if you can actually, you can uncheck JSX. This is the original way it was used. It looked like this. And when I first looked at it like this, I was like, wow, that is like the ugliest language ever. I never wanted it to work like this. Where I want to inject stuff, I want to create an element, which is a div, and I want to put some stuff in there. I want to pass in some properties. That's what props are. And I was like, wow, this is terrible. Then JSX came along, and then it took the form of this, which is way cleaner. I was like, wow, that's a lot nicer. So when I was working with React. And then, they've gotten rid of the classes now too. And even though it's showing you that this is the way that you can definitely do it, version 6 of the router, version 18 of that we're at now with React, it's quite changed a lot. I'll tell you that the preferred way of using React is not with classes like this. And what we're seeing here is you're seeing a renderer, a rendering lifecycle function, and that's what you would typically do with the class object. You have a class which represents their component, and so here you have a hello message component which is kept in its own file. That's typically how it's done. And then it extends, which is kind of inherits from the React component superclass, right? And then you can pass in properties, and you can suggest state. Properties would look like this. If you have a constructor function, you can pass in the properties. This became quite challenging, to figure out. People complained about it. I have to manage state. State was kind of a global variable that people were using to, because remember that HTTP is stateless, right? That means if you refresh the page, then your data is gone on the back end. So how to manage that? Well, again, we're using a single page application, which fools the user into thinking that we're moving from one page to the other. We're not doing that. We're staying on the same page. That's what React is doing. It's also doing something called creating a shadow DOM, so a shadow document object model, that it works within a memory, and then when it's ready to construct the pages, it spits out the pages in a constructed format later on. It's a little bit better. It's almost like a caching system that it uses for quick operation, which is really kind of cool. So that is nice. As you can see, you can add bindings. There's a whole binding area where you have to bind parts of your page together when it comes to kind of these events that are happening here. And these bindings that you have to use, kind of uglier, older JavaScript, right? Where this handle change event, you want to make it so that it binds to this, and the this keyword, which is totally weird and misunderstood by some developers. They wanted to get rid of this thing. They were like, wow, this is not something that we're interested in. We've evolved to the point now where we're very Angular-like. Can we not get away from this? And I think in the latest iteration of React, they've done that. And we'll talk about how they've done it. They've moved away from using class-based components to functional-based components. And you know me, I love classes, but I'll tell you that the functional way is just the better way. Okay, and we'll talk about how it works. So let's look at the documentation for this really briefly. So the way it would work is we have a component. We have components broken out into different parts, right? And different pieces. They have different concepts here. If I go to main concepts, and if I look at hello world, it talks about how to put together, how to get started. It talks about JSX and what that is, which is its own little language, right, to kind of inject content into the page. When I first saw this JSX stuff, I was like, oh man, don't we want separation of concerns? Don't we want so that the controller and the view are separate, right? Well, and kind of we do, but even in Angular, they do have different pieces where you inject content using different kinds of syntax, like a double curly brace, that kind of stuff. And so they do the same thing here with React. If I want to inject something like a name, format name is the function, and what I can do is I can use curly braces to inject the value of what the function returns right inside of the constructed HTML. And this HTML we're going to inject inside of a template, which we're going to see later on. So very similar to what we've done with EJS this semester as well. So that's kind of how it works. So they talked about components and props. And notice now, as soon as we go here, there's two ways to do a component. One of the ways is, well, with a function. And the other one is with the class. And they talked about how to render a component. And when you're rendering, you have the render function, which is a lifecycle function. But they've moved away from rendering. And what they've done instead is they've just returned a value. So now this is what a component would look like now. Okay, something like this function. You have the name of the component, and then you have a return statement. And this is so much cleaner, guys. Like they've completely evolved to get to this part. Okay, way better than what it was before with classes, because you don't have the overhead of a constructor, a super constructor, passing in state, all that kind of stuff that Angular still does for the most part, even in the latest version of Angular. Yeah, I think it's way easier, right? So that's the way it works. They also talk about state and lifecycle functions, and they talked about what those lifecycle functions are here. There's some great reading in terms of how this all works and what every piece of it does. However, the thing that I really want to focus on just for a second is this idea of hooks. So we talked about how state is being a global variable, and they've kind of moved to something called hooks. And this is the new way of how they put things together. So here you import React. That's the ECMAScript module pattern. And we use state from the React module. Use state is the hook. So use state, you're going to see that inside of our code. It looks funky like this. And when you look at it for the first time, you're like, what the heck is this? Well, actually what it is a tuple or a tuple, right? You have two parts. There is the getter and there is the setter, getter and setter. And then what we have is use state with an initializer. So the initializer basically says that This is a number, a counter. That's a number that has a value of 0. And we can set count inside of our object, where I can pass, because it acts as both a setter and a getter and a setter, we can pass the count back into the value of count as a state. So this is the way it would work. And when you first look at this, it looks almost counterintuitive, but then you're like, no, that makes sense. It totally does. It's like way better. You can avoid it as much as you want, but hooks are here. And with React from version 16.8 and on, I'll tell you that it's been very interesting to use hooks. There are two main hooks that people use the most, state and effect. And we're going to see state and effect is very similar to a view did load if you're someone who programs in Swift, or a component did mount, or some kind of thing where the component is ready. And now it's the initialization step. When the component is ready, it's almost like I'm ready to start rendering my page. I'm going to start creating or generating my HTML. And that's what that use effect does. But one thing to note is it's not just an initialization step where we change the document title, but it's also something that is reactive, which means that when I do something, let's say, for example, if I modify state in some way, use effect gets triggered again and again and again. So we have to be careful about over-triggering use effect, because it can cause our page to reload multiple times or reset or make multiple calls to the back end. So use effect has its issues as well, but very cool. You can build your own hooks. You can do all kinds of stuff, but hooks and the functional programming style of component-based, kind of web development with React is amazing, and that's why it's so awesome. So what have I done for you? I've starting from Wednesday of this week, I've kind of completely rebuilt, our front end from the ground up with React. Okay, with the latest version of React, I've bundled it together for you, and I've put it up on DC Connect. So if you look up on your course shell, there is a front end that I've zipped up for you. Now, it's not complete, but we're going to get into this in a second. Before we get into doing that, let's see how would it be like to install React from the very first time from scratch. For this, I'm going to go into our tech part right now, and I'm going to go into section 3, which is you guys, right? And section 1, which is you guys. I'll be okay. And for section 1, you can see we already have our API right there from last day. And if you hover over it, you can see that it's 44 megabytes. Okay, keep that in mind. Previous iterations of our code over the last little while, most of it is in the node modules folder. You can see that it's 44 megabytes or whatever. Going back, it's like smaller and smaller, and way back when we first started, it was still about 22 megabytes. It's about double the size, it's growing to about double the size now, which is not terrible because most of it is in stuff that we don't own. It's in node modules, okay? Okay, just keep that in mind. So now let's take a look at bringing this into Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to grab this whole section and bring it in there. There we go. And what I want to do is I want to use some installation, ways of installing this whole thing. So I'm just going to clear this up. So let's go into the installation steps before we start off. So if I was going to say, how do I install React? How do I do that? So if I go back to the React documentation, and if I go to installation, you can see that there is a way of creating a new React app. And typically the way you would do it is you would do something like use npx. This is new for some of you. npx is not like npm in that npm downloads and installs your modules on your machine, whether it's in the global state or for that particular project, right? npx doesn't do that. What npx does is it goes out and it's an executable, a node package executable, basically is what it does. And it executes the package and does all of its work without installing anything. So it kind of keeps it low. That's what it kind of tries to do. And npm or npx is one way to do it. The other way to do it for us is using yarn. And since we got yarn, yarn has a create verb. And what we're going to do is we're going to do it two ways. We're going to create the React React with just JavaScript, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. And then we're going to do it with TypeScript. Okay, both. So it looks like this: yarn create. Let's start like that first. Yarn create, and we're going to say React-app. That's how we're going to start off with. And then from there, we need the folder we're going to create. We're just going to call this folder test because we're going to get rid of it. And then that is all you need to do. So yarn create React app test. And if I press enter, then boom and bam, it's going to start installing stuff. And you're going to see it's going to continue to install stuff and more stuff and more stuff. And it's got Webpack and it's got Babel and it's got a bunch of plugins to make this insane. And it's going to be to the point where there's no chance that you'd be able to do this on your own ever. No chance. Not even, I mean, with Express, you know what? You and I could probably figure out how to manually install everything on the Express generator by now by ourselves. We could probably figure it out. But no way. Take a look at what you get when you get this thing. You get a bunch of node modules. All right, this is the standard way of doing things. Package.json has a preset set of libraries similar to what we got with Express Generator, right, when we did the back end. All right, it has a lot of things that it installs for us and a bunch of scripts that we can run. One of them that we're going to use is start. We're going to use the start script. The other one we're going to use later today is build. Build actually packages off for production. So those are the two scripts we're going to use today. It's pretty much broken out into two folders, the source folder, the SRC folder, and the public folder. All right, so the public folder is where our starting point is, believe it or not, between the index.html, which is comes with all React applications, right? It has a manifest that it connects, right? And it also connects to something that looks like this. We have a area here with a div tag with an ID of root. And my friends, this is where everything gets injected. Right here, my cursor is. That's the entire app gets injected in there, right? And by the way, Angular works almost exactly the same way. If you're going to use Angular, it would have a simple way. That's where, you know, your application would be injected or installed right in here. Okay. So interesting. So that's the index.html. Everything, you must have an index.html if you're going to do front end, right? And on the back, you also have a code behind file, which is our index.js. So index.js, separate from index.html. There's no connection between them. Notice there's no index.js here, right? It's only here. And this index.js is on the development side only. Okay, I got to say this, right? Is what happens is it kind of is a place that puts together your module. Think about this as the application index. It's not quite the application. The application is actually this part. Okay, that's the application. It uses the React document object model to create a route, which it uses just vanilla JavaScript to find an object with an ID of root, make a reference to it, and creates the route there. So in other words, it goes back into our index.html file, and this is where it's been created right here. So that's the root of the document, okay? And then what it also does is now it injects the app module inside there. Notice the syntax. This is a different tag. It's a custom tag right for React. It's rewritten the rules, if you want to say, for custom tags or custom elements, right? And then we use ECMAScript module pattern to import from different modules. And you can see here that we're importing from our index.css. That's how we import it. We can even do that with CSS. Here's our index CSS, which is very, it kind of applies to the index itself. So any kind of base level styles, example, the font family you want to use, if you want to use web fonts, this is the place to put it here. Okay, that's the one you want to use. Or any Consolas or any other kind of font family you want to use, it's right here. Okay. There's also a app module. The app module is called app.js. And app.js has the module pattern we talked about, where you have a function and the module name, which is app, followed by a return. And everything that's the module is inside of the return statement inside of these parentheses. Okay, so this is the module. The module is using JSX, so the latest version of the language, which is kind of shorthand for creating a template, if you will, to put things together. So notice that it looks like HTML, but note that it is not HTML, just like EJS is not HTML. It's a fragment, a code fragment. And what we're doing is we're injecting our logo. Here's our logo, which is a logo SVG file, inside of the source object for the image that we're going to put out here. Okay. We have a bit of paragraph tags with some other things we want to kind of link in there. We have, notice that in our anchor tag, this is our anchor tag broken out over a couple of lines here. It would rather actually look like this. Typically, when we look at an anchor tag, it's just a link, right? And you can see that there's an href here for now. You don't have to, typically we don't use hrefs, and I'll talk about that. We use, when we're using a router, which we're going to be using, but this is kind of what an anchor tag would look like, correct? With maybe the kind of the words, which is learn React, and then maybe the closing tag, right? So take a look at this. I'm just putting it together so you can see it in one. It was kind of broken out, so it looks like there's lots going on, but really there's just one anchor tag. But notice that the anchor tag uses something called class name. We can't use, here too, we can't use class because class means, well, class as in an object class, a blueprint, not class as in a CSS class. This means CSS class, class name. That's why whenever you see our code, when you see class name, you need to use these because it will clash with the class keyword, which is not what we want. Okay, so that's how it works. And how do I run this thing? Well, I can use my yarn again. So going back down to here, I can kind of CD into my test folder, and I can just run yarn start. And what this will do is it will enable Webpack to start packaging things together. It will run a very small development server that is got browser sync enabled. This is all the technologies that you get packaged into React.js. And then it's like, boom, it's going to give you this, your little example app. Notice it runs on port 3000. By default, you can modify this. Okay, so that's kind of how it's running. There's our little React. It's got a little logo and it's spinning around, and yay. And just like we've done before, if I go back and I modify something, let's say, for example, I don't want any of this in here and I want to say hello world, then you can see that as soon as I type this in, when I can type finally, right? And if I press save, then immediately, well, we've got hello world. It immediately transpiled or converted, and we have, you know, hello world right here. It's immediate. Okay, so that's kind of the way it works. A lot of times what we want to make work is we want to do this side-by-side thing, just like we've done in the past, where we have our, you know, website on the right side for front-end development and our code on the left side, right? As an example, where you can take that back. I don't want that. I can save that. And as soon as I save it, bam, it's done. You can see that it's automatic reloading, and it gives you some information right here when we're building. Cool. So that's how it works. And this is great. And it would be okay if we were using, if we were just using JavaScript, and we've been using JavaScript the entire time, but that's not really what we've been doing. And if you hover over some of this stuff, you get some information. Okay, you can see that you get some information, and Visual Studio Code is supplying us with all this stuff, but not a lot. Okay, so what's better to use, of course, let's just stop this. We're stopping the server now. And let's get out of this altogether. So CD up one, please, to the section 1 folder. Let's get rid of this altogether and start over again. And if you were going to say, well, can I just add TypeScript? And I would say, hell no, don't do that. Reinstall. And I'll talk about why. Remember, I talked about this already. It's a beast, right? We just said it's a beast, a huge beast. By the way, before we erase this, let's take a look at how big this thing is. So our test framework right now that we just installed is 173 megabytes. Okay, we went from 44 to 173 megabytes. Wow, React is so small. Oh my gosh. Everyone keeps saying how small and compact React is. It's not small and compact to work with. It's pretty big. And when we install TypeScript, it gets even bigger. Let me explain this to you. So let's erase it. So delete the test folder. I'm just going to press Shift Delete to get rid of it. and it's going to do its job. And then I'm going to get back into this, and let's install React again with TypeScript. So this is how it would be done. Yarn create React app space, the name of your folder. We'll call it test2 this time. And then some options, which is -- template. And we can say TypeScript. And if we do this, this is the command. I'll kind of copy paste this in your chat if you're interested in trying this out. Okay, so let's do that chat thing. Here we go. And then when we do that, you can see that if I press enter, it's going to install React again in another folder called test2, but it'll also include a bunch of different things. Okay, so let's take a look at those. By the way, all these little warnings and things we're getting, that's nothing to do with us. That has to do with them. And then they're going to continually update. You're going to see that if you were to work with React over the next week or two, they come up with regular and nightly builds where they update. It's a very active project. That's why they're at like version 18 right now. Okay, it's like crazy update. So there you are. We've installed everything, and let's just run it again. So we'll do the same thing we did before. We'll do a yarn start, and we'll run it. It'll be the same. Well, actually, we have to get into there first. I always do that. Let's get into test2 first, and then do a yarn start. There we go. And then once we've done that, then it's going to do the same thing. It'll run it like a little development server on the back end, very similar to what we've done before. And on the Angular side, we would just do an ng serve, which is kind of the exact same thing. So whether you're doing Angular or whether you're doing React, you have this little development area, and it's being managed by Webpack. So there it is. There's our development server, right? And as it loads, you're going to see it's exactly what we had before. A little bit, it takes time for it to transpile. That's what's happening right now for the first time. And then the next build we do will be incremental. So it'll be a lot better than this. Okay, so that's why it says starting the development server. If we take a look while it's doing that, and if we look at our structure, it's the same structure that we had before, right? So you can see that we have our index, but now the index is an index.tsx, where it's a TS with JSX. That's what it stands for, right? And app.tsx. Remember that app.ts we had last time? It's the exact same thing we have this time, but, well, it's even better, because if I hover over now, I'm getting a lot more code hinting than I did before, all right, which is what I want. I want more code hinting, not less. I want more and more tooling. That's why TypeScript is awesome, and I'm going to keep using it, especially for React. That's the kind of stuff we want to do. But take a look at the transpile time, right? Let's pull this thing to the side here so you can see it side by each. So if I change this up and I said hello world now, so remember this transpiling at the same time, right? And if I kind of press save, then bam, it's done, right? So it's transpiled and changed everything and modified the whole front end in very short order. So very, very good in the way that it works. Okay, so really good stuff. And like I said, I prefer the TypeScript side compared to the JavaScript side because of all the tooling support. And it's literally seamless. There's nothing for you to do. You don't have to worry about Control-Shift-B to try and transpile manually. It takes care of it all for you, which is awesome. So does, by the way, Angular is the same. If I was going to compare and contrast with the two frameworks at this point, again, you can target your port to whatever you want, any kind of port you want to use. That's all configurable. So a really great selection of things. Now, how big is it? Okay, so let's take a look. So here's test2. If I hover over, we're not going to be happy with this one. 281 megabytes. Okay, 281 megabytes, guys. It's crazy. It's insane how big it is, right? And that is massive. Now, you got to consider that there's stuff that there's temporary files because we're running a server and a bunch of other stuff that Webpack has done for us. But, guys, it's like we need to find something that's a little bit different than this. I mean, it's huge. It's 1/4 gigabyte to run a small site that does, right now, nothing. Literally nothing. It doesn't do anything. It just has this little spinner. That's all it does. All right, so this is nice. And that was my little tour, what it is, how it's put together, how to install it, and all that kind of stuff. Let's stop this insanity, right? And let's also delete this one. Okay, let's get out of that. So we're just going to delete it. And I'm just going to go up a step out of it. Close it off, please. And now what we're going to do is the next piece, which is stuff that I prepared for you. So let's get rid of test 2, delete those 10,000 files. That's how much it was, 10,000 files, dude. It's crazy. 280 megabytes. All right, so it's going to do its job. But up online, what I've done for you, and I spent time doing this for you this week, like I said, is we have a front end in a zip compressed format. This is your in-class exercise part 2 that you're going to be working with. By the way, I'll have the lab report out later today as an example. But here's something that I want to talk about here for this one. And I'm going to go grab it from just running in another layer here for a second. I have it, for me, I've downloaded it just like you. And I'm going to go into Durham, and it's here inside of my examples. Here's my part right here. So I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go into my section 1 and paste it. There's my zip file. I'm going to extract it here. So I'm going to go into zip and just extract it right there. There it is. And there's your front end. And then get rid of the zip archive because you don't need that anymore. Awesome. And then now that we have that, let's get back into Visual Studio Code and take a look at it. So there, if I refresh, you can see that I have my in-class exercise 14 front end. That's the one I want to work with. And actually, I want to work with both of them now. Okay, but let's inspect the front end just a little bit. So bring that in there. So now it's just the front end. And I want you to look at the insanity here. Ready? Ba-bum. This is all the stuff that's going on now, right? Now there's only 41 files because it doesn't have a node modules folder. Let's add that node modules folder in here. So I'm going to control backtick and let's clear that up. And we'll just do a yarn install. Please do a yarn install right now. So it adds in all those crazy node modules, some 37,000 files or components or whatever you want to call it, that's in there, right? Okay, and then once it does that and we go back out and measure it again, if we're going to do that just to see how big my files are compared to what we've done so far. So if I go and do that, and oops, that's the wrong one. Then if I hover over the front end right now, where we start at is around 263 megabytes. Okay, that's where we're starting off at. And that's kind of a pretty much configured starter that I'm giving you right now. Okay, there's some issues because if I gave you everything working, then there wouldn't be much of an ice, would there? So let's do the next part. So this is the first piece. I have all these files and we're ready to go, but we can't run the front end without running the back end. So let's run the back end in a separate instance. And this is where we're going to go today. Because remember, we have 2 projects, right? Here's our new window. There it is, our new Visual Studio Code. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag and drop the in-class exercise 14 API that we made last day in there. Okay, so there's that one. Immediately what I want to do is I want to transpile, Control-Shift-B, to transpile the back end because we're using TypeScript. Right, there we go. And it's going to run. Let's just make that maximized for now. So make sure you do the Control-Shift-B and it works. If it hasn't worked already, there is. So I want to do the watch task. That's why I didn't see that happening. And I want to move this one to the right side of the screen. So I'm just going to use my window button right to go to the right. And I'll do a window button left to go to the left. So you can see now that I've got both sides. I've got my server on one side, the back end, and I got the front end on the left side. That's why I want to work today. All right, awesome. So we have some stuff. We had a bit of an issue last day. We said that there was a function that in our auth in our controller that was looking for, there was no, not all code paths return a value. The way to fix that one is if I go back to the bottom of this one, so that's outside of this one, just before the request response and next, and put just a simple return in there like this, that will fix that issue. So it'll take away that problem. It'll transpile nicely, so that'll be gone, that issue. Okay, and it's really not, it's a non-issue. It's just TypeScript complaining. All right, so that's what it's doing. So I want to I went to my other window. There it is. There we go. Okay, so now that we've got that all straightened up, that's good. And I want to run not this, but rather I want to run nodemon. So I want to run a nodemon over here, right? So let's clear that up and run nodemon, please. So you got nodemon running on this side, and we want to launch this side to see what we got. Okay, so on this side, just like we've done before, we're going to go here and clear that up. And we're going to do, on the left side, we're going to do yarn start. So now we got both servers running. This is the front end, and this is the back end. Okay, so let's see if you guys got that working. You'll see that as soon as this runs, it will do exactly what we did before, which it'll use Webpack to transpile everything we've got here into something that we can create. There it is. It's starting to happen. Webpack is working. And then what's going to happen is it's going to create a very familiar looking front end. Let's take a look. Something that you guys have been using for, all of your life with me right now, from the first, part of the semester till now, right? How about that? And it's taking its time because it's transpiling for the first time, and that's why there's a white screen. So you can see that the development server is starting. And as you can see, there it is. So we have everything working as you would normally expect for the most part, except for this part, because I'm already logged in. But you can see here that everything is working the way it's supposed to work for the most part, okay? Stuff that's working is if I go to my contact page and I go to show contact list, it'll redirect me back to my login. All this is good. And this is all happening on the front end, okay? So let me explain how this is put together for you right now. Okay, so let's go back to this part. This is my front end, and let's go through it. So one thing that we need to know with our front end here is on the left-hand side, there is this http common.tsx file. Let's start with that, okay, as we explore this kind of stuff. And I'm just going to look at this here. We are using Axios. So there's Axios has been installed for you. We're using the ECMAScript module pattern to initialize it, and we're configuring it here so that we have our base URL using localhost 3500/API, which is what we have on the back end. Remember the back end? It uses 3500. 401, by the way, that is unauthorized. So there you go. It was unauthorized. That's why it beamed us back to the login page. All right, it kind of did that for us. All right, so that's you're going to see, we make a request on this side, and we're going to get a response on this side. And this is the thing that we're going to look at as well. All right, cool. So we've got this piece. But I mean, this would be okay for only working locally. But if I want to work remotely, then of course I'd want another base URL, something that would look more like what we would put on Heroku. And it might look something like, I'm just going to expand this for now. It might look something like this. It might say, if we were going to use one that would work on Heroku or something online, then it would be https://, and I would say, no, there's no port required. And it would be something like, I called it WEBD6201. You call it whatever you call it, right? -winter 2022, and then you guys would be section1.herokuapp.com/API. That would be your base URL. And then we have to remember to switch this out because this URL is only local for local testing. Okay, so just FYI, if we're ever going to put this up on Heroku or anywhere else, the base URL here has to change, and there's one place to change it, and it's an http common.tsx. However, we're only testing locally, so let's do it the other way around. We'll kind of bring that up and comment out the other one, because that's the one we're going to use when we're live. Okay, so save. And again, if we see what we've done every time we save, it transpiles. It kind of puts together all of our code nicely. All right, nice. So that's the first part. Next is our app.tsx. Our app.tsx now, well, I mean, it has a lot of stuff, right? It has, I'm importing the browser router, the route and the routes from React Router DOM. That's another module. We have different components broken out. So on the left-hand side, you have folders. You have the components, header and footer that we've done in the past. We just formatted it this way. And they're inside the components folder. Okay, footer and header. We also have all of my content folders, my content files inside of the content folder. So in the content folder, you have your about, contact, home, page not found, project, services, and so on. And I also have in here kind of bundled together all the contact information, which is, this is the, if I was going to break it out a little bit better, let's move this around just so that way you can see it. I'm just going to move it down here. Then this is all the contact list stuff. So these are the contact list components. Yeah, that's what this is. And then what we have is some authorization routes. So that's login, register, logout, and require auth. So I could have kind of just, I'm just organizing it here. It's not required. It's not going to make a difference in any way, but I would kind of put it probably together like this. So this is kind of my, authentication components. So this is these are my content components. This is kind of common components. That's what those are, right? And then page not found would be probably like a content thing where I want to kind of show my page not found. So that's kind of where they come from. And we import them the same way we've seen them imported in Node.js, where we say import whatever the name you want to use, that's a friendly name and alias, from whatever the folder you're going to use, and it injects that right in here. Okay. I also inject styles and fonts. That's what's done there, right? And also you can see what the template would look like here. I am using the class template, but we can simply convert this if we wanted to a function. But the thing to note is not that, but rather this piece right here. So this is your template right here. This is almost like using the index.ejs file we just did, kind of last week, where I have my browser router, which is almost like my container. Inside my browser router, I have a header and I have a footer. My header component gets injected there. My footer component gets injected down there. So if I looked at my header and my components, you can see that my header up here is a function header. That's a component. I'm using the state hook. I'm also using the useEffect hook, where the useEffect hook is checking to see if I'm logged in. And this is the way that I toggle the logout and login and contact list links. I use a toggle login as well as a toggle contact list, so I can toggle in and out of the links inside of my navigation, which, by the way, you guys should be very familiar with by now. This is my navigation. So it looks not like it's something that you can't consume, that you haven't looked at it. I mean, it's wrapped in a different syntax, but who cares? The code that we've been working on all semester is right here. Okay, it's the exact same code. The only difference is the way it's accessed. So instead of class, it's class name. Instead of anchor tags, it's nav links. As an example, and nav links are just part of the React Router DOM that you're going to see here. Okay, we use an auth service, an authentication service, and that authentication service, all services are in the services folder. I have several services here. One of them is the auth service when we connect. Our auth service basically takes care of things like login, logout, registration. We want to get the user that's logged in, the current user. That's inside of our auth service. We also have another service that we're going to be using called a contact list data service. And the contact list data service basically does all of our contact list operations. Create, read, update, and delete. Okay, it does all those things. So that's what we have for services. And so they're not components necessarily the way that the other ones are. And notice that each one of these is its own class. It's not even a component class. It's just a regular TypeScript class. Notice, even this one. And, well, this one is a component, but those ones aren't. Okay? So that's very interesting the way this works. We're going to come back to this one because this is the one we have to work on today. All right, so we also have models. Inside of our models, we have our user model, which is just an interface. It says username, password, first name, last name, email address, as well as our contact, right? There's our contact model. And you're going to say, wait, why do we have our model on the front end and we have also a model in the back end? Well, we need to do it. If I'm going to have some kind of structure that I want to use to transfer data between the front to the back, I need to match what I have in the back end. And now people have also commented like this. They're like, wait, we're duplicating. Yes, but no. And we'll talk about why this is the way it is in a second. All right, so cool. So this is good. So we have our structure. Content is all the content pages. Look at the content pages, what they look like. Here's our home page. Our home page is a module function, home. We have a useEffect like we talked about, a hook, which allows me to, remember, the hooks look like an initializer where when we first start the module itself, then we have this. It returns some HTML code, what it looks like, with a link to my about page. So that's why I'm able to go to my module right away from my home and click on the About Us link, and it'll use the router to switch me to the About link. Notice that also that I'm getting active links for free. I didn't do anything about this. It figured out how to do the active links for me because I'm using the router, React Router DOM, which is built into this. So it's really great. It took a lot of my workload away just by doing that. I don't have to worry about active links. It did it for me, which is awesome. All right, so that's something that it did. I can inject all of this content anywhere where I reference the home component. So going back to my app.ts then, if I look in here, when I'm routing my home component, the element that I'm referring to is the home component itself. And so what I'm doing is I'm actually returning the home component, well, right here. This is where it's going. So this part here gets replaced by my home component. So like we did before in my index.ejs, we have my header, my content, and my footer. Exactly the same way we did it before. Nothing else that you haven't seen in the past. All right, so that's how it's set up. We also have some authentication routes that are here, or some components. These are all the components for authentication: login, logout, register, and require auth, which actually allows me to redirect a user, right, if they're not logged in properly. And that happens inside of my app.tsx. You can see that inside of here that I have my route, and here we have require auth that wraps my route. So there's my contact list, there's my add contact, and my edit contact. Those three routes here are wrapped with a require auth, and that'll not allow me to go there at all on the front end. And by the way, if I wanted to get information from the back end, it's going to be unauthorized anyway. So both ends, front end and back end, it's protecting that particular route. That's your auth guard, or your guard, a root guard, if you will. They call it different things. All right, so that's how this thing is put together. And it looks like a beast because it is. And it's from Wednesday till today. That's when we built it. Yay! Tom stayed up until whatever hour in the morning. Anyway, who cares? Let's get into the next piece. So I want to put this up on GitHub now. I'm just going to go and kind of do this. And let's do that together. Git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say added project files for in-class exercise 14 front end and git push. So that'll do all my front end files that we're doing right now. Awesome. However, we also have, oops, it's not what I intended to do. We also have my back end, right? My back end, we have a change we made, and that's why there's still files that are ready to go on this side. Okay, so let's try logging in, and this is the in-class exercise now. I've kind of given you a tour of what I've put together. You already know about this part. We did this together over several weeks. This is kind of the hard part. This is what your Lab 4 is based on, by the way, all this stuff. Let's get into this, and let's see how we can do it. So I want to log in. So here's my login. And if I type in admin and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 like normal, I go to my login page and wait, where's my data? How come my data is not there? Oh man. Well, let's check our server. So on the left side, you can clearly see that we're still running. Oops. It's not what I wanted to do. That's not what I wanted. There we go. On the left side, you can see that we're still running. And on the right side, you can also see that we're also running, and I got these 401s. What are 401s? This is when you guys can chime in. The what?
It's the authentication, right? So it's not authenticating correctly?
It's not authorized. That's where you're getting. You're getting not authorized. So if I go to, I'm doing a GET request. There's the GET request. It's going to my API. Here's my route that it's following. That's why this is great to use. And it telling me that I'm getting a 401, which is unauthorized. Wait, but didn't I log in? I mean, I logged in, right? So how am I not authorized? Well, remember last day what we did when we used Postman. Postman showed us a couple things, right? We used the tool, and some of you liked that last day. So let's go into our workspaces for you guys. This is workspace for section 1. And you can see what we had is whenever I wanted to look at a, if I wanted to do the contact list, this is the contact list, right? You can see that there's an authorization section with a bearer token. So even if we were logged in, we still need to supply a header with a bearer token that shows us this. So if I click send, and if our bearer token hasn't expired, and it hasn't, you can see here that I've got all my data. Here's my data so far. Okay. Excellent. So that is my data, and we can do it with this. So there's nothing wrong with the back end. There's something wrong with the front end, right?
I'm not just getting a little guess maybe. So we're logging in, and we don't have the bearer token, which is actually what provides us the information to be displayed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right?
It's exactly right. So now let's disable the requirement for the bearer token on the back end for now to prove it out. So again, I'm going to go to config on the back end. I'm going to go app TS. I'm going to scroll all the way down to where it's about 107, 108. That's the line. And I'm just going to look there and notice that there is this passport authenticate piece that we put in there to protect the entire area. We're going to just comment that part out, just this one line with including the comma there, so that it can still run. Still going to run that route, and just save, please. So you can see the router is going to restart here on the right side. Here it is. It started. And if I go back now to my website, and if I refresh, then we should be good to go. There's a proof right there. Proof that exactly what you say, Cameron, that our bearer token is not making it to the back end. Okay, that's one problem. Let's try some other problems. Well, let's suppose I want to delete this user here. So let's see if delete works. Let's check it out to make sure it all works. So delete, I get a kind of a question. By the way, I'm not using jQuery for this. I used JavaScript to make this work. I'm going to click cancel. It doesn't delete. If I try to do it again and press OK, goodbye to that user. All right, so that's pretty good. How about adding? Can I add a new user? Let's try this out. So I'm going to click add. And then this is with me, there's no protections here. I just want to make sure that everything is working as it should. The connection from the front end to the back end, it's communicating properly before we go on. Okay, so let's add that in. So the next part is, let's think about another superhero. So we'll say from the DC universe, Clark Kent, right? He's in the 416 as well. Why not? And we'll say Superman at example.com. If I can spell example, I cannot. And click add and see what happens. So add, and it doesn't work. How come? Why is this happening? We know 100% that the backend is working properly because we tested it thoroughly last day with Postman. So what is the problem here? What does this point to? What are your thoughts, guys? It's definitely 100% not the backend.
So it's not the back end.
It's not the back end, right? It's got to be the front end, right? That means that somewhere over here, the way we're communicating with the back end is incorrect. Well, we know that this is broken out over different pieces. Let's take a look on the left. And we can see that I've organized it so that the content list components are right here. Let's go to the add.tsx file. So there's the add. And we can take a look at it for a second. And we can see that it's a component. And it has use effect, here it is, as well as use state. Those are the two hooks, right? We have a bunch of change events for changing the full name, the contact number, and the email address. It'll update the states. Every time I change one of these things get updated. That's what happens, okay? And then if I scroll down, I get this save contact, and I'm saving this right here. This contact, I'm saving this information. So what's the problem here that you can see? And let me bring up my controller from my contact list here, and let's see if you can spot the problem. So here's my contact list controller, and I want to do a process add page. Here it is on this side. So here's this, and here's this. What's the problem? Can you spot it? How about Logan?
Like,
Logan, what are your thoughts? Can you spot the difference? Are you there? Are you with us on this one? What's the problem? Here's what I'm trying to send, and this is what it's trying to receive. What's the problem? It's that simple, guys. I'm pointing right to it.
I'm looking at your cursor, but like, does anything be even? Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
yes, 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 guys. Yes, guys. It's so dumb. So I could go here and correct it. I could do that and correct the data because that's the data package that I'm sending around through the contact list data service, which is using Axios to create and using a look at the then catch. This is the promise that I'm using. So I'm sending across the data to the process add page through the API, and it's expecting full name lowercase f, and I'm giving it full name uppercase f. Let's just change it on the server side this time. Even though the server's not broken, the reason why I'd want to do that is because I'm telling you I have a bunch of references to full name and contact number and email address all over the place. So I'm going to say that for now, it might be the safest thing to do on the back end. Not because it's the right thing to do, but the safest thing to do. We can always go back in and change it. If I press save here, just by changing those three things, it's going to reboot the server. And if I go back out to my files, right, and let's delete that empty file that we just added in. And if I click the add contact and add them in again, so let's say Clark Kent, and then 416-444-4444, email address is superman@example.com. And if I click add now, here's Superman. There's Clark Kent, and it's adding properly. Oh, is that?
maybe check his alter ego also in the Superman out of example. He's like giving away his identity.
I know, Kal-El. I could probably do that too, but you know what? It's okay, right? So this is pretty good. So this is, yeah, I probably could have put Kal-El or Clark Kent at example.com. Yes, you're right. But anyway, so that is add. Add is working, and we modified something on the back end for this, and we also identified that there was a problem on the front end. So let's just modify this now on the back end. We'll just put this up on GitHub. So we'll say something like, and it's got to be both sides, one side and the other side for GitHub now. So git, there's two different projects. Git add dot, git commit -m. We'll say fixed bug with add controller. Git push. You can say the add controller, or you can see the add component, whatever you want. It's a bug. Okay, we fixed it. Awesome. That's excellent. Okay, that's what we did on the right side, on the server side, all right, or the back end. Okay, good. So now, what about the next problem? We've done delete. We know delete works. We know that add works. We know that read works. What about edit? Let's edit our friend, Clark Kent. We just made our friend Clark Kent. Let's edit him. So going to edit, and I'm going to type in there, and I want to type Clark Kent's, or let's say Kal-El. And I can't seem to edit anything at all. Oh man, what the hell? It should be editing, right? So that's the first problem. There's a couple problems with edit. This is the first problem. What do you think is happening here? Is it the back end?
I'm gonna say it's the front end.
It's absolutely the front end. It has nothing to do with the back end. This is front end stuff, right? So front end, it's not allowing me to type in there. And it's really weird behavior. Look, I'm trying to type stuff in, and it's just like resetting what I'm getting. Almost like it's cycling. It's cycling. Right?
It felt like it was specifically repeating over and over and over and over.
What could cause that, right? Look at this. Listen to what it's doing. Look at it. It's like, it's every time I go there, I type something, it's like completely spamming my server. That's what it's doing right now. What can cause that? Well, let's take a look at the edit.tsx page. So again, going back over here, I'm going to go into the edit.tsx page, and my culprit, believe it or not, is staring right in your face, right? It's this one right here, this use effect. And use effect, remember, it is an initializer, but it also triggers every time there's a change. One of these things, whenever I type one of these things, it re-triggers the get contact over and over again because this is being changed. Oh man, that sucks. Well, you can get over that by UseEffect has a little option where you can add in an array for things that you are watching. We don't care about everything changing. We just care about the ID changing. If my ID changes, this thing right here, fine, reset. Don't allow me to do it. Get my contact again. But don't keep getting my contact with everything else changing, because if I change my full name or contact number, this resets over and over again. And that's what's happening here. So that's the first problem. The first problem is that we don't want that to happen. So if I just change this piece right here and press save, and if I go back out to my page, and if I start typing again, let's say I want to make it Cal-L, now we're good. Okay? Now we're good. But that's the first problem. But if I click edit, it, well, doesn't work. It didn't work.
Can I take a guess at?
Yeah, tell me. Tell me, yeah.
It's probably because on our back end, we are still using lowercase.
You're right.
Full name, contact, email address.
Yeah, you're right. It's the same problem. So down in here, you can see that in my process edit page, here's my front end, here's my back end, my process edit page. This has got to be either this place or here. I'm going to make it on my back end. We change this to full name, contact number, email address. If I press save on the back end, and if I go back to this, and if I edit them now, let's put them back as Cal-L, right? And press edit, then you can see that, sure enough, it worked. So now everything is functional. Let's put it up on GitHub. Okay, front end, back end. We made changes on both sides this time. So here on this side, we made a change to the edit. So say git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say modified edit.tsx to correct UseEffect bug. That's what it was. Git push. Okay, so that's what this side is. This is done. And now this side, we modified the contact list again. So again, just like before, we're going to say that git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say modified contact list controller to fix edit page, process edit page, process edit bug. Git push. Okay. So both things, we modified both sides because there needs to be a connection between the two. All right. So far so good. We've got both things working, and great. Now we need to fix that other bug. The bug where we're logging in, but we're not getting anything. When I'm protected here, I'm having a problem, and it's not knowing what my bearer token is. I have to fix that problem now. How do I do that? That's all front end. Yeah, well, it's already in local storage, right? We know it's in local storage. Let's take a look. Yeah, let's take a look. So I already did that for you. So in our application, if you look, here's local storage. There's our bearer token in local storage. That's not the issue. Remember, it's not in local storage. It needs to be in our header. Our header has to have the bearer token in it, this part. Let's fix that problem. I'm going to show you where that is. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the front end here for a second. I'm just going to maximize this because I'm going to work with the front end a little bit more. And if you look at the front end, then on the left, you can see we have some services. One of them is this auth header service that I was starting to make, but I didn't complete. Let's complete it together. So first of all, let's make it so that it looks nice, because this looks like crapola, right? As I started making it, let's just organize it a little bit. I'm getting the token, I'm getting a user data from local storage here. That's what this part is. And I'm basically saying that we start off initializing the user with null. This is my user string, or our user information, if you will, from local storage. Here I probably want to use curly braces, so that way we don't have any issues. That's just good coding style. So this is what I'd want to do here. And the same thing goes with this. I don't like the way this is configured. This is not my preference. You might like it differently, but this is me. I like putting it on different lines so it's nice and clear. And we can clearly see that this is the function we want to use. We want to basically say something like this. I have my auth header. Let's also rename this thing so it's named properly. So it should be auth header, capital A, for any kind of services, or oops, or components should all be caps like this, or upper camel case, if you will. And once this is correct here, we need to correct this piece. This is the part that we have a problem with. And we're not even using it anyway. So this is the correction that I would make, okay? Just to indicate where the issue is. This is the first problem. The first problem, we don't have a good way of getting the bearer token connected to the headers, okay? So that's exactly what we want to say. We want to say that headers is actually going to be using the authorization header. That's what we're going to be doing. This is the kind of matching what we did with Postman. I want to put this in quotations, although I don't need to. I'm going to do it anyway. Please do that. And also change these to the same kind of double quote style. Choose one or the other, doesn't matter. And this now is basically saying this. I'm going to return an object, and the object is my configuration object that includes a reference to the headers that I want to change, what header I want to modify, what's the bearer, and the user token. Okay, does this make sense? Let's take a look here in my online. I'm going to go back here, and let's take a look at my my actual user token and see what it's like. So sure enough, I have a key value pair in the local storage. We know about this now. And my user is the key, and token is the value. Token is here. So there's my token. And so it's definitely user token. So that is correct. User token is right. Because we're getting a user. The user represents the entire thing from local storage. We're using a local storage is like a map. And I'm using key value pairs to return the value of whatever is being stored in through the user key. It's being stored inside of my user object. I'm parsing it, making it JSON, right? And then I'm taking the user.token in the one I want here. The reason why it says user and user token, both have to exist. Have to have a user object. Does the user object exist? Yes. And do I have a user token? Yes. Both of those things must be true in order for me to return this. Otherwise, I'm going to return, well, nothing, right? And that's kind of what I want to do. I don't want to return anything, right, when an empty object basically is what I'm returning. So this is my auth header, and I'm going to put this up on GitHub. So git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say modified auth header service git push. And it's like, instead of it being a service, it's like, to me, I think about it more of like a utility function. Maybe, you know, hindsight being 2020, I could have made a util folder and put that in the utility folder, because that's really what it was. It's kind of connecting to my local storage, seeing if I got anything there, and taking from my local storage and helping me inject the header into the proper place. That's what it's doing for me. So more like a utility. All right, next. So that's nice. But what does it do? Can I use it? Well, my biggest problem is here in my contact list data service. My contact list data service doesn't do anything with it. Here is my post requests, my get requests, but I need to use my auth header. And the way to do that is to import it. So let's do that next. So I'm going to say import auth header, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that auth header and I'm going to use it at the end. So this is what Axios allows us to do. We can configure the header by basically saying, I want to put the auth header at the end. And guys, that's it. That's all I have to do to basically inject the auth header every single time we do any request that is on my protected routes. Now, I had a question earlier, and I'm going to ask you the question I was asked, and you tell me, should I do that for the entire section? Would you say it's a yes or a no for this one? Do I want to put the bearer token on the entire section? Think about what I'm asking. I have a key, and that key is going to open any door, right? But it's like when I unlock one, I unlock them all. Do I want that? Well, yeah. Do I want to put auth header here, or do I want to put it somewhere else where I stop my contact list data service from even for even wanting it? Once I'm using my contact list data service, then I know I'm authorized, then I'm good to go. What do you think?
Wondering. So, say if you were to just go to the ad page directly,
Hmm.
would and if you didn't put auth header there, but if everything's connected to the contact list data service and you authorize that, um,
It's tricky. It's tricky. It's really, honestly, I would say it's a point of architecture. It's up to you how you implement this. Me personally, I wouldn't. And I'll tell you why. Right? I'm going to have multiple users, right? Potentially accessing my app at different points of my app. Someone's going to do an ad. Another person might be do an edit. And someone else might be doing a read, right? As an example, and they're going to have different bearer tokens, right? And these different bearer tokens are going to be unlocking those doors, right, or the windows to the app, right? I don't want my whole app unlocked by one person. I want each individual door to be unlocked. That's why I'm doing it this way, right? Do you need to do it this way? Maybe not. But my brain tells me that this is probably the safest thing to do. Okay. Are there other ways of refactoring? Are there other ways of refactoring? Yeah, I do too. Are there other ways of refactoring? Maybe, but this is the thing that I'm looking at. Okay, so now let's try it out. So let's put this up on GitHub. Git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say added auth header to my contact list data service. All right. Thanks so much, Logan. Take care. Really enjoyed having you in the class too. Good luck. And I'm hoping you enjoyed this part.
thank you as
Excellent.
well.
All right. Take care. All right. So I added my auth header to it. It's just me and you, man. And then I put this up. It's okay. It's been like this the entire day because people are doing what they have to do. I understand. So now that I've got this, I've got I've added this up. So contact list data service, we're good to go. Let's test it. So, well, let's push this first, git push. And let's test this out. So I'm going to do this, and let's go over to the right side, which is my server. And now we want to resecure my servers. So again, I'm going to go out to my config app.ts, and where we commented it out, the server, this part here, I'm going to comment it back in. So let's put it back in. There we go. Someone's run out of paper on my printer. Yay. I'm going to save it. All right. And you're going to see that it rebuilt the server. So I'm going to put this up as we re-enabled security. And we'll say re-enabled security, git push, right? And then once we've done that, let's test it and see if we're good. So I'm going to go back out to my site, log out, which wipes out the bearer token, and then log back in. And yay, we're good to go. And we should be able to go to the edit page and the add page, and we should be able to delete and all those kind of things, because let's delete cal just to prove that. Bye. And we're good to go. All those things are good. And you can see that on the right-hand side, this is the proof here, that when we look at the server signaling, it's all good. It's all beautiful. Look, it's a 200. A 200 is all okay. A 200 means that there's nothing that is unauthorized. Okay, pretty good stuff. One thing we are getting is a bit of a, well, I corrected this with the other groups, but it says that the collection remove is deprecated and we should be using delete one, delete many, or bulk write. Let's fix that. That is a small bug on the server side, and that's inside of my contact list controller. On my contact list controller here, if I scroll down, when we do a delete, it says that remove is deprecated, that we should be using delete one. Let's just change that to delete one. All right, there it is. And if I press save, you're going to see that that warning now is going to go away. So no more warning for that kind of stuff. And if I go back and delete, we wouldn't have known that unless I actually deleted and then you saw that. So let's add that guy back in. Parallel. And then, right, so he's back in. Right, there he is. We can see that that is all working. And now if I delete him, right, if I go back out here, then the delete worked and there was no issues. Okay, and there's all your track of what's happening. So again, really awesome. We've got things working, and now this is the last bug we're going to fix. We're going to say something like git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say updated the delete method in contact list controller. There we go. Done. So now we've got everything up to date on pretty much both sides. Now the next steps. So Cameron, how are you feeling about this now? Are you getting it in terms of the way it works, back end, front end? And this is yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I would say so. Like, luckily, like when you, especially when you're like showing like the index, for example, like how it looks pretty much identical to what we were doing, just with a little bit different kind of syntax and everything like that. Like whatever you're showing me, I'm understanding. It's going through my head. And you're like, okay, I can wrap my head around that.
Wonderful.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
And I'm like good. I'm not like super. I'm not lost or anything.
That's good.
I'm
That's
following
good.
Along.
Well, especially for the crash course in React, 1 day of React. Like I said to you, I usually spend weeks doing this with students, right? Putting together a front end. We're just doing it with 1 day, but the idea is the same, right? So we have this part here. We have our front end, and I wanted to take a look at this for a second. Let's take a look at the stuff we've got. So here's our front end, and here's our back end. Okay, and now I got a question from someone today, and they said, do we really have to do it this way? I mean, wasn't it just easier just to use Express, the Express View Engine, and not even have a front end? Well, I want to point this out to you as well, since you're here and people that are watching on YouTube as well, is that it's not about that. It's not about what's easier necessarily. It's always about what's the right thing to do and what your scenario is. Like there's no magic bullet, right, at the end of the day. So here, the great thing about having a separate back end from a front end is that, well, now the back end, it's an API. It can serve any front end. Let's say, for example, next year, my enterprise place I work, as an example, they say, you know what, we don't want to use React. We'd rather go to Angular. No problem. I can swap out the front end. The back end stays the exact same for the most part, maybe some minor tweaks. And I'm back up and running. And I have a brand new front end. And what if I have, a group of designers and they want to do an update, right, as an example, right? So they want to do an update, and the update is they want to have a separate front end that they're updating, and then they're going to cut over. They cut over from the old front end to the new front end. Same thing, still using React, but a whole new component, almost like a whole new service that is, running on the front end. And this idea of microservices, where we can actually break the front end even further down into smaller pieces, is better than what we call a monolithic application, a massive application in one place where we have everything on one box, right? It's more modular. And the other reason for this is if I have a set of developers, I can have people who just work on the back end, right? And that's all they do. They work on the routing and they work on the data management and connecting to the database. You can have a database administrator that works on the database piece. You can have a front-end developer that works just on the React and how it looks nice, good layouts, nice components, good-looking styles with whatever Bootstrap or whatever they want to use in the front end, their own custom front-end stuff. You have a middleman who kind of does that stuff that lives inside of this folder right here, which is the services folder, that connects the services and the models to connect to the back end. Someone that kind of works in the middle. That's kind of a full stack developer, a person who kind of knows how to do the front end and the back end, and they know how to put things together. So you can have many people working together as a team, and they're not going to step on each other, right? That's the idea behind this, right? It's more extensible, it's more maintainable, and it's more testable. Make sense?
I would say so, yeah. Because I'm thinking like especially because now you can kind of divide. And things are, I would say, a little bit more secure. If you have a problem with the front end, it's not like it's a problem with the whole application
That's right.
itself. It's a problem with the front end.
And we can
And like
finish.
maybe being split up, yeah, you can split up teams, make it easier.
Yeah.
Have dedicated teams for each side, not one application or one project that has just a bunch of people targeting it for different reasons.
Exactly.
You can split it up and make life easier.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And the thing is, remember that anything can consume that data. Right now, our front end happens to be a front end API, like, for example, React, but it could be a mobile app that consumes the data. We have our hooks. These are our APIs, our API endpoints. And if I have a mobile app that kind of consumes the back end, doesn't matter. It could be an Android app, an iOS app. It could be something else. It could be a game that I connect to if I want to share information. I can have multiple front ends with a single back end. And that solves a lot of problems, right? It kind of unlocks the potential of why we want to have a back end in the first place, right? And we can add more endpoints, and those endpoints may have nothing to do with this front end, but they may have to do with some other front end that they need some other pieces of data from our back end, right? Which is us connecting to the MongoDB database. I can swap out the database, and you won't even know. You won't even know where the data is coming from. For you, you're agnostic. You don't care where the data is coming from. The server's taking care of that for you, right? The back end, right? Last activity before we move on. I want to build my front end, and I want to do this by, let's take down the little development server here. So Control C, take it down. And I'm also going to stop my server on this side. Just take this down here too, right, for now. And what I want to do is issue a build command. And this is kind of the last step where you would put this up on, on your server. I would probably select 2 different servers for this. You could host these in the same box. There's some work we can still do. For example, on the back end, I could, at this point, remove all the views and disable the view engine. I could do that, okay? I could remove all the client-side stuff, like literally delete all the client-side folders and the views folders and make it only so that it's a server. I could do that, right? On the front end, there's also some additional cleanup I can do as well. And part of that is this build. So I can do a yarn build. And if I do a build, what it's going to do is it's going to create a build folder. Notice it's a build folder that it's grayed out. So it's not something that's going to go up on GitHub, right? And what the build folder is going to do is Webpack, remember that crazy Webpack tool, it's going to take all of the files and everything else that it has in there, and it's going to compress them and create a front end. And now what we can do is we can go git cd space build. So we're in the builds folder. That's this right here. Notice that there is an index.html page which is compressed, okay, as well as all of my static files, like for example my JavaScript files. These are all compressed, right? So things have been taken out, they've been converted to JavaScript. And now my build folder is actually the final product of all my work that I did. Think about this as a studio that I've used, the development studio. And here on the front end, it's super small. Let's see what happens when I serve it. I can serve it by using light server. I can say light server. And if I use light server there, because all it is HTML, then now this is my front end where I can kind of serve up the front end, right? It's already logged in. That's why we have that stuff there. It was logged in. I can log in, right? There it is. I can log out, me logging out, right? And you can see on the back end, I'm still receiving the same signals that I had from before, the same messaging on the back end. But the front end is actually really, really small. If I take a look at the front end now, and if I go up online and see how big it is, and this is the power of React and Angular and all those other frameworks, because we wanted to see this is the culmination, like I said, of everything else. If I actually take a look at that build folder, it's really, really small, right? And this is where, people would argue with me saying, guys, it's like 2 megs. So 280 megabytes boiled down to 2 megs, right? And that, my friend, is awesome, because if we have that, think about the speed we're talking about. It's compressed, everything. The images are compressed, everything is compressed so that it's working just perfectly. Tickety boot. And the back end, it doesn't matter because it's hosted somewhere else. It's pretty big. It's like 48 megs, something like that. So the whole thing is maybe 50 megabytes, 2 megabytes for the front end and 50 megabytes for the back end. With some compression, it could be even better. So pretty cool, right? So that's what I'm saying. And that's the final thing. So for your in-class exercise, I want you to do the build, okay? And there's no need for you to put it up on Heroku. I know Heroku's having some issues. For those people who are watching this because there's lab issues as well, Heroku, I mentioned earlier, has a couple of deployment options under the Deploy tab. You can certainly connect it to GitHub, or you can use Heroku Git, which is using the Heroku CLI, or the Heroku tool belt is what it's called. And you download a little module. It tells you what to do locally on your system, and then you can directly connect to Heroku with some credentials. And this way you can directly send up stuff right to Heroku because it has its own kind of Git API, all right, which is pretty cool. All right, so you can get around doing the GitHub stuff. All right, so very cool. And so what do I need for you to do for your in-class exercise? Well, I definitely need you to build out both the to make it work, both front end and back end. I want them to synchronize together and solve some of the same problems that I kind of put up before. So if you're watching this, I've given you a starter for the front end and for the back end. If you follow along and if you can show me a video where everything is working properly, you're good to go. I want it to be built. So if you can build it, like do the build and run light server, because the build will be kind of the final version of your front end application, which is really, really super small. Last thoughts and takeaways, stuff that's missing. Okay, let's talk about stuff that's missing that I couldn't get to, that maybe you want to challenge yourself and try and do. I don't have any validation. I couldn't get to that. So I just ran out of time. So I couldn't do the validation for my contact us page or even for my contact lists. I couldn't do that. I couldn't go in here and when I add a contact as an example, the validation is not working because I removed jQuery. All that stuff is gone. All right. It's the same thing goes with the edit and add. There's no validation here for this one. Also, there's no error messaging. The error messaging that I had before with Flash messaging is also gone. I ran out of time. And so I removed those things in favor of getting the majority of the app done for this demo. All right, so that's what I kind of did. So there's lots of little things you can still do in terms of making this work perfectly. Other things that are missing are making sure that it works with, Bootstrap. It's not 100% working in terms of showing us the compressed view for mobile. All right, so a bunch of stuff needs to be in place. These are minor tweaks that I just literally ran out of time for. So those are the things that I would challenge you to do on your own. Okay, and some other things that we talked about, some cleanup, tying up loose ends and all that kind of stuff. So that's it. Just to go back to the stuff that's due. A reminder for those people that are watching again. Lab 4 is due this Sunday at midnight. The final version of your Lab 4 with your project team is due then. In-class exercise 14 is now due Saturday. I should have a lab report that basically does exactly what I did here. There's 2 parts to the lab report. The back end, where we made it into an API, that was yesterday on Wednesday. And then today, I've given you a front end kind of starter, and you connected it to the back end and fixed all the problems. Okay, and then the third thing is you built it and you saw that it was a very, very small build. Those are little things. There's no need for you to put it up on Heroku or anywhere else. I think that'd be great for you to try, because they should be put on their separate things. Your front end, React, cannot go on Heroku because React is just a website. That's all it is, just like Angular. There is no connection for Heroku. It works on GitHub pages, though, if you wanted to try it there. And the back end, you could put on Heroku. and that would be totally simple if you wanted to do that too. So that would be the culmination. So really, this is the $100,000 job. It's full stack, my friends. All right, whole full stack where you can do the front end, with React. You've got MongoDB and MongoDB Atlas. That's a second server that you've got up on the cloud, and then the third part is Heroku with the backend Express API. Awesome stuff, and this is where I wanted to lead you to the entire semester, to this day. All right, so goal accomplished for me. Cameron, are you good?
I am good.
Any questions for you before we go?
I don't think I have questions. I just want to say, like, this class is like really cool. If I'm gonna be completely honest. I just like,
Awesome.
I was like thinking about it like a little while ago. I think it was like yesterday or something. I was like, out of all the classes we've done, this is like one of those ones where like we started with like something that was like so like we was like a little baby of like a
Yeah.
web application, and it's just
Yeah.
evolved, and like you can see the amount of progress and the amount of things that we've added to it,
Yeah.
which kind of is crazy to look at, but really cool at the same time. And like I don't know, I really did enjoy this class. I like the energy, I like the way it was taught. Overall, I thought that this class was like really cool and especially like helpful. And the fact that we could go through so much in like only 14 weeks, kind of like again crazy.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and you know what? It's a credit to you and to all the people that were here regularly that went through it, and for all of my missing friends out there who I had at the beginning. We kind of lost them in the second half because of other courses and everything else. They were kind of wrapped into different things. Shout outs go to people like Zoe, who's really enthusiastic. Jacob, I didn't see Jacob today or much this week. People that I missed, that were with us a lot of times, and people that were here all the time, like you, and of course Cooper. I can't forget Cooper and Ethan. You guys were kind of my go-to guys when it came to questions. You guys were really great, and I really appreciate all the work and the effort and the attention. It makes my job a lot easier when I have someone to talk to. So thank you so much, and good luck in your future endeavors and in the summer and what you're going to do, and take some time off. and like I said, you got the $100,000 skill now after today, right? Because you can do it. If you really wanted to, you can be a full stack developer. This is the thing that I wanted to get to you with. So thank you so much, Cameron, and good luck.
Thank you.
And stay connected with me on LinkedIn. Again, if you so we don't, there's always opportunities where we can connect with each other and maybe connect again in the future. All right. So take care. All right. Thank you so much, and I'll stop recording on YouTube. All right. Thanks, man. Take care.
Thank you for class, Tom.
Hey, man. Take care.
Take
Thank
care.
you. All right.